We welcome the members of the Women in Caribbean Aquaculture to share with us about their work and about their work to support women scientists and in the growth of the aquaculture industry in the Caribbean region. So I'd like to welcome our panelists now. Dr. Julianne Royes Russo is the founder of Women in Caribbean Aquaculture. We have Leanne Bennett, who is the Senior Research Officer at National Fisheries Authority. Jalima Gold is the president of Belize Women's Seaweed Farmers Association, and Janelle Johnson, the environmental biologist, graduated from University of West Indies. Welcome, ladies. You can go ahead and unmute yourselves now.
Thank you, Jean.
Thank
Hello,
you.
welcome. Thank you for being here.
Hi,
Um,
everyone. How are you?
Julianne, I'll start with you as the founder, and let's talk about sort of the origin story of WICA and what inspired you to create this group.
Jean, thank you so much for having us. We're truly excited to be a part of the greater North America Aquaculture Group. I'd have to say, really, it was a need for connection. I studied in the US. I lived in the US for 23 years. And throughout my time there, I would have to say in every organization that I participated in, whether it was academia, when I was doing my graduate studies, I worked in industry for a while, and I traveled around the US working in different states. I was practically the only female woman of color, Caribbean person, even at the PhD level. In every boardroom meeting, every conference I attended the World Aquaculture conferences many, many years. And I could only see, I didn't see anyone that looked like me with my background, my culture at any of these conferences. And so I would have to say for that time period, it is a very lonely space. And then during the pandemic, I had started previously to the pandemic to start going back to Jamaica. I had opportunities to work with several NGOs. And so that's how I got back into consulting in my own home country. And every time I went back up until 2018, I noticed that the aquaculture industry was declining significantly. During the pandemic, that's when my need to really connect with my home country and my culture really started. And, I noticed I started seeing your organization. I started seeing also WISA, the Women in Scottish Aquaculture. But even before just thinking about becoming a women's group, I wanted to connect. And so through the social media, everyone now had the ability to have a phone where they didn't before. I started reaching out to the farmers I used to work with. And I did like Instagram lives. I really utilized social media a lot, just trying to talk with them and find out what was happening. And what came from that was that the farmers would say that, everyone's kind of working in isolation, even within Jamaica, and they were not really connecting. And so one of the suggestions by November 2021, I talked to like a couple farmers. I said, we really needed a networking space, but no one was willing to do it. So I said, okay, I don't know. I just ended up, I already had this platform, let's start networking. And so we started actual Zoom networking. It was the very first Caribbean aquaculture networking space. We decided that it wasn't just going to be about Jamaica, because Jamaica it's a small space. Why not just reach out and the entire Caribbean? And then further is why don't we try to bring the world to Jamaica? So, that's idea of working in isolation. There's no need for that anymore with the digital space. And so we started reaching out and having webinars. From those webinars and just word of mouth, we had more persons come on, or that's how I met Leanne. And then Leanne told her friend or her colleagues, and just by word of mouth, we realized that there were more women scientists than there were men within the aquaculture space. I thought I was the only one for all those years. And so by 2022, we started connecting as women in our own separate networks and realized that women in science are not highlighted at all. So, you know, aquaculture was not only declining, but then the women scientists were never acknowledged. So anytime there was there is International Day of Women in Science, women in aquaculture are never acknowledged. So it's not, the science of aquaculture is not something that within our space and our culture is, really highlighted. So we decided 10 of us, and it really expanded. It's a small amount, but by virtue of opening the space to the Caribbean, there are 10 of us from various islands outside of the Caribbean, like me, because many persons have to leave their countries in order to get a higher education within aquaculture. So we have quite a few of us that are spread out around, that are working as in academia, or they're doing their PhD outside of the Caribbean. And then we do have persons within the Caribbean as well that did not know that, each of us existed. So in 2022, we started having more informal networking sessions. And in 2023, Biomar became our sponsor for us to formalize as a group. And in 2023, we became WICA. And that was, looking at what you guys were doing and what WISA was doing. And we said, we need to have our own organization, because again, most of the persons that are in science or in higher education are women than they are men. So we wanted to really highlight that, and that's how we became WICA in 2023.
Thank you so much for that, Julianne. I think your story and your experience really kind of emphasizes, especially what Sage was saying earlier in an earlier session, where, visibility really kind of creates such a strength in the community. And yeah, it's very easy to kind of be isolated in your own work and not, see and look around the room and not see like-minded people. So to be able to kind of reach out beyond, your workspace and look to the broader industry is seems like a really huge impact for women in aquaculture. I want to bring in the other ladies here in the WICA team. Leanne, why don't we start with you and how you came to WICA?
Hi, afternoon, everybody. So I came to WICA, as I said before, through just contact with Julie. We noticed that there were some, a webinar going on, and then she contacted me, and then we started to attend these webinars a little more. And I realized that it really is an initiative that can expose women scientists, and I've been on board ever since the initial or initiation rather of WICA, really. So it was just a random meeting, and that was it, pretty much.
How about Julima? How did you come to WICA?
I'm trying to remember exactly how it happened. Before I even knew about WICA, this is something that I've been talking about as the Caribbean kind of getting together as a whole and working together. I don't know if Julie heard that somewhere. I believe it was through another contact that Julianne got a hold of us. And that's kind of, we made a connection, and now that's kind of like how I'm here.
And Janelle, how did you find the group?
Hello, so I'm an environmental biologist, but food security is near and dear to my heart. And I believe aquaculture has the potential to make significant contribution to the improvement of food security. I heard about the WICA group through a WhatsApp message, through Roman Lime, something that we have in our department. We were told about the aquaculture group. Students were signing on to become volunteers. And so that is how I joined the aquaculture group in the Caribbean. And I'm so excited about it and the potential that it has for the Caribbean. and
Yeah,
aquaculture
absolutely.
at large.
Absolutely. And especially from your perspective as a recent graduate, this is something that I think was brought up again in the Sage session previously, but I wanted to get your take as well in terms of like how important is that personal connection to like-minded women in your community, aside from, beyond the professional networking development part of it.
Okay, so being a new graduate and having people like Miss Leanne, Miss Julian, Jamila, having them to talk to, learning about how they work, how they got in the industry, how they work in it, that is very important. I believe that mentorship plays a major part in engaging students, young scientists in the industry. And so it is very critical to have mentors, female mentors, in whatever industry it is that young scientists are joining.
Julianne, I want to get back to you and sort of the mission statement of WICA. Can you talk a little bit about some distinct challenges that female aquaculturists face specifically in the Caribbean region or of Caribbean origin? What are some of the challenges that you feel are specific to the group, your community?
Great question, and I hope the rest of my panelists get to answer because they have also a unique perspective just coming from each of their sectors. For me, it's culture. So when I started out, I fell into aquaculture. Aquaculture was not something that was on my agenda. I started out in the sciences. And so in the Caribbean, I believe it's still like that. If you decide to do sciences at an early age, you're going to end up in the health field. And so aquaculture is not something that you would probably hear about from high school or getting into university per se. So it was something that I fell into just by chance. And I had to learn, the hard way about all the different aspects of aquaculture, but it was a passion and it was a love. And so that's how I learned along the way. So one of the challenges I believe is that it's not taught in the schools. And so women do not have this avenue to get into aquaculture if they choose to do sciences or if they choose to do tertiary education. From what I understand, a lot of women might be in administration or the processing aspect, but we do need to have more women in the science, R&D, and creating their own businesses.
Julima, maybe you can speak to your perspective as well as president of the Belize Women's Seaweed Farmers Association. How do you align both of the mission statements of both these groups, and how does what are sort of the challenges that you're identifying that kind of overlap between the both groups?
I don't know if we have many challenges that kind of overlap within the groups, and I'm going to keep it defined to our topic, which
Okay,
is,
sure.
talking about more women, because there are many, many challenges when you talk about the aquaculture and I guess mariculture. But one of the big things for me, I don't come from a scientific background. I kind of came into this because our association started with the need of creating alternative livelihoods, for our small community, but also traditionally and culturally, when it comes to mariculture and seaweed farming, it is not for women. And so we wanted to create a space and we wanted to try to kind of start pushing those gender barriers because women are out here, we can do it, but so that's how we kind of started our association. And I think it really aligns. I mean, our association aligns along, with WICA in many, many, many different ways. And I think that one of the things that we've come up with is that information sharing, each Caribbean country is so small. And I think we also face some of the same gender barriers being very traditional, where men are in the ocean, men are captains, men do all of those things. And so pushing some of those gender barriers and cultural barriers, I think is something that we probably have in common, I think, with each Caribbean country. And so I think working together to do that is something that's really important. And it's actually very powerful. And I think it can get us very far.
Amazing. Leanne, I want to get your perspective as well from, I guess, the research space and what your experience is.
From my perspective, to be honest, I know that Caribbean women in particular are very ambitious women, and for us, when we see something, we go after it. Man or woman, it doesn't matter to us. We see it, we want it, we go after it. I think one of the challenges I'm realizing in the aquaculture space has to do with culture, it has to do with communication as well, is that most of the times we tend to be behind the scenes. We like to stay behind the scenes, be a little bit maybe shy and not say much. And we have done a lot of accomplishments. We've worked very hard, but I think we have to get comfortable with speaking about what we do and letting the world know. And then the communication aspect is really just making sure that we have access to all of the data, kind of more data sharing. It happens, but I believe we can improve this data sharing among us as a Caribbean nation. And I think that as time goes by, it will happen. But otherwise, really and truly, there is no barrier for us regarding women because, as I said before, our ambition really drives us, especially in aquaculture. We also do need to have more women within the fields regarding business and in aquaculture rather. Access to land, access to business opportunities is something that is not on the back burner, but rather needs to be put at front and center so that a lot more women can have access to the aquaculture space. And again, there is the whole aspect of keeping it within the Caribbean. The research and development aspect needs trained scientists. And if we have to go overseas all the time to then come back, it can prove challenging. Some ladies, if we have families, we want to do everything here in the Caribbean at home with our families. Makes it easier for us to be trained while at the same time being able to, stay close to home. So those are just some of the things that I think happens within the aquaculture space.
Yeah, and I think that's a great segue then to kind of come back to Julianne to talk about the initiatives of the group and what are some of the projects that are helping kind of address a lot of these challenges that we've identified so far.
Right. So what we wanted to do initially was to just let the world know who we are and what we were doing. So I started an editorial with the fish site and interviewed 10 women, signed the initial 10 that started the group, just to let persons know what are the different aspects of aquaculture. Again, aquaculture, I think the previous group was talking about, it's not an accessible word. And so the idea of what aquaculture is very limiting. It's limiting probably in our region, just tilapia farming, and what does that look like, and as a male-dominated field. So all of our women work in many different fields. We have sea urchins, we have crustaceans, nutrition. And so we wanted to show what the range of what aquaculture can looks like in the Caribbean. Our main platform is education. So that's how we really want to start reaching out to let persons know how they can expand into the field. Then we had a WhatsApp group for 2 years. So we communicated a lot between each other, just being a support system. Again, it's very difficult for most of us that have to leave our islands and to work in, foreign countries. The culture is really different. And so having that support group, which I never had, again, I think a lot of this comes from my experience having been in the field for more than 20 years. I never had a support group, and I never had mentorship or anybody that looked like me, any women that looked like me. So it was really important to me to have a sisterhood. And I've so enjoyed the sisterhood in the last 2 years that we've been doing this. It has been amazing. And so just getting together in the WhatsApp group. We now moved it to a private Facebook group, because we really want to expand the sisterhood and bring more women from across more islands to come and join us and to just, hear what is happening. And so we are about capacity building and networking, just trying to understand There's not that much statistics about the roles of women throughout the Caribbean. And so our first initiative is to really see who the other women are. So our group, the persons that usually come to our networking events, have been primarily scientists or business women. And so we really want to broaden it and try to get what are the other roles. So that's our next group is more networking events and capacity building. We also really want to have our first in person. We've been doing this online for the last 2 years. And so we are heading towards the World Aquaculture Conference, the Latin American and Caribbean chapter in Colombia, couple of weeks. And there we are going to have our first in-person for whoever's there. But we really would like to target it in the Caribbean. So our next big project is to start looking at having a women's summit or meetup group within the Caribbean, more than likely Jamaica, just because hey, we can't beat Jamaica. So we want to do that in that sense of, yeah, you know how we are. But hopefully the idea is that we'd like to do it in all the different islands in the future so that we can really bring more women together in the same space and to have an agenda that we can now understand what really can we do to help women in the space of aquaculture, whether it's professional development, whether it's providing grants or is it business development or just helping with grants for projects on their farms. So those are just some of the initiatives. And as Leanne said, we're really looking at what are the roles of women towards leadership. Like we do need to have more women in leadership, making the decisions and looking at strategy and policy making.
Yes, absolutely. And it sounds like it's a running theme that we've kind of discussed during today. Sage also mentioned how there's such a lack of data in terms of where the women are, where are they working? They make up 50% of the industry, but where in the I guess aquaculture industry hierarchy or in the sectors do they exist? I think Julie said something like, we can't account for what we are not counting, right? So Leanne, that's something that you specifically talked about earlier. Can you talk about that and the importance of data moving forward?
Okay, so yes, data really gives us a real-time look at the actual numbers. Yes, you have anecdotal data that basically allows persons to have some idea, but with data, you can get concrete evidence of the women involved in the aquaculture space, where they are involved, how they are involved, what aspects of that involvement are they responsible for, and where do we need to then improve their involvement? Is what kind of help do they need? What kind of assistance do we need to render for them to be in these leadership and mentorship roles? And so really, that is where I think data plays its part. Concrete evidence, critical evidence that will then allow us to be able to be part of the forums globally, because places like FAO, they will always ask for data from the Caribbean. We have our own entities, the CRFM, who also drives data and needs data to help with the decision making and planning. And it also creates visibility for us because, as I said before, sometimes as culture dictates, we tend to like to be behind the scenes and we're okay with it. And we know we're making waves. You hear about us making waves, but what kind of waves are we making? Where is the data to show the waves that we are making? And so even for the down to the countries, Jamaica, Guadeloupe, St. Vincent and the Grenadines, St. Lucia, Barbados, all those and many other Caribbean islands, they too need this data to see, and Belize, can't forget Belize, they too need to see this data and what capacities need to be built and where there are shortcomings, and also wherever there may be an excess and there needs to be a movement, a spread of the women, so that we can have an equal portion of the areas of aquaculture being touched by women. So that's really the role that data plays for me, and I hope to be able to contribute to that data collection and assessment and analysis, and to see how best under WICA and of course with the National Fisheries Authority, we can further develop Jamaica, develop the Caribbean, so that the world can see who we are, what we do, and what we are about.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think this conversation actually just reminded me of one of our on-demand sessions that's available right now through Spheric Research. There's a research analyst there, Oriana Aguilon, that was able to kind of provide us some of the data that they've collected in terms of what are the roles that women have in the salmon farming sector, and she talked about how the salmon farming industry has not yet tapped into the potential of having women in leadership. And she breaks down the numbers of the data that she does have. But I think with to Leanne's point as well, it's important to have detailed, comprehensive studies of the communities in which you work. Jalima, I'll kind of talk back to you. You talked a little bit earlier about the cultural expectations that kind of play a role in terms of the experience of women in aquaculture. Can you talk a little bit about that and how it does play a role in terms of a workspace culture, and how those expectations kind of influence that and women's experience in that?
Yes, I can speak, just for us or for here in Belize. Like I said, it's anything you're talking about when it comes to the ocean fisheries, we fall under mariculture, which falls under aquaculture. So we are more out there in the waters, on the oceans. And traditionally, it's always been a man's space, right? Like the women have been on land cleaning fish or on, doing any of that, but there's never been a real space for women out there on the ocean. And that is one thing, when we started the association, it was just kind of about farming seaweed and creating alternative livelihoods. But we soon realized that there was an undertone of all these other aspects that needed to be pushed. And one of those things was that gender equality, and having women have a space there. And so we do many more things than just that. We have been trying to work in our own communities, and it's not easy because we are a very traditional Creole fishing village. We still have all those fishing guys out there who are just kind of hard-headed and stuck in their ways, so we do continue to push and push and push. One of those ways that we are trying, which is not really seaweed farming, we recently had the first of its kind female captains training to train females to be captains, because part of the thing that you don't understand when you're working on the ocean is that, yes, you can even be a female and do all these things, but you're still out there and you're in a boat with a man 22 miles out there on the ocean, and they are in control of everything, And so getting females even out there in, I guess it's a little bit different of a leadership position, but it is a leadership position when you're on the ocean as being a captain. And so we did work with entities here, and it was a first of its kind training, and it was very, very successful. But we're trying to kind of empower women in other aspects, not just of farming, but of creating their own businesses, policy. There's a lot that has to be done with policy and the government aspect of it, permitting and all those kind of things. So we have just been really pushing and pushing forward, and it's something that's very, very passionate. And it's a passionate thing for me. I have a daughter, she wants to be a fishing captain. Like, I want to change those gender roles. Women are very capable, but also pushing against traditional and cultural things. It's a different kind of a fight almost, it's not like we can data collection and those things are like super important, right? But it to me, it's a very different on the ground kind of personal. We see these people every day. We have, like, even if it's little phrases thrown, and what are you going to do when the waves get big and you can't be out there doing this, or you have no place out there. It's just it's almost subtle, but it's underlying. It's like when we're just walking down to the boat or going there, you can hear the guys say something to you on the side, like, that's not your place, or that's not for you, or whatever it is, right? So there's a lot of mental strength that has to go into it, I would say, you know, and women are very, very used to being very headstrong and having that strength, but you really have to have something to push those cultural gender, you know, boundaries inside. It's like a different kind of strength that you kind of have to just put on your armor and go out there and say, I know what I'm doing, and I know why I'm doing it.
Yeah, absolutely. Is there a way, do you think, in your experience of um educating against that? Like, what are sort of the methods in which we can kind of create discussions and engage with these like traditional thinkings and kind of push against that?
You know, that's why I'm saying it's hard, like when you're going against traditions and cultural, you know, people are very stuck in their way. It's something that's ingrained in them, right? So it's not something you can go and you can present to them on a, you know, this is why it's good, this is why it has to happen. But it's more just, I think, grit. You know, I think that women just have to have grit, and they have to keep going, and they have to not really let it phase them, and show the men more or less like we can do it, you know, because it's like, it hasn't always been easy for us, starting the association, being out there farming and doing that. And I think that it's every time you make a little mistake, they jump on you and say, see, this is why you can't do it, because you're a woman. And you have to go back and tell them, no, the reason why we can't do it is because it was a climate change, or it was a problem with this. It's the same thing that they would have to deal with, right? But I really don't think there's a specific way that you can actually teach it. I think you have to show it. And I think you just have to have grit and put on your armor and show them that it can be done. And you can think that way, yes, but things are going to change regardless of how you think.
Yeah, absolutely. And maybe one of the ways that, oh, yeah, sorry, Leanne, you want to add to that?
Yeah, I just wanted to add, say, I think one of the ways that we can do it is by training the next generation of women to be fearless. If we say to them, you can do anything that you put your mind to, it doesn't matter whatever you want to do. And then for us who are in the field of science, who are in the field with seaweed production, education, and starting startups like WICA, we can mentor these young girls. There's nothing wrong with taking your nieces and your cousins who are 5, 6 year old with you out in the field. I mean, appropriately, what they can manage, you will understand. But if they see that from their young, then when they become older, it is like second nature to them. So I think we need to foster the next generation of women to think beyond just gender. I'm a woman, but that does not stop me from being who I am.
So for our association, I definitely agree with that, right? And we have kids involved and having the kids see that, but our association is actually a women-led association. We, in the very beginning, when we started, we were back and forth. You can't get funding. You have to do this. It has to be all women. Our mission and our vision statement was to uplift our community, right? Like that's really what we wanted to do, is uplift our community. I have a son. All of these people had sons. So we kind of went back and forth and we're like, how can we still, you know, be women-led and women empowered? And so we decided to have it be a women-led board. The board will always be women, but we have you know, memberships for men if they want to be involved. And I think this is also very important because yes, we should teach the younger women about it, but when we start to teach these 17 and 18 and 19-year-old young men, and they're able to be in an association that's led by women, that they have women as bosses, you know, or women that are telling them what, and they get more comfortable and used to that. I think that's very important too, what we're doing, because this last captain training, we had 8 females, but we did train 3, they were 17, they're 18-year-olds, right? But they were males. And so that's also where you have to get the women that are young, but you also have to get those young men involved. And in the Caribbean, a lot of men, they don't want to be run by women. They don't want to be told what to do by women. It's just kind of like that's part of that traditional thing. But if you can get them in at a younger age and they see that it's not so bad, that they're helping me out, we're getting you your captain license, we're teaching you something, and it's not a bad thing, that those young men will also then grow up and not have that old, stubborn, traditional, you know, way of thinking.
Yeah, absolutely. Janelle, I wanted to get your perspective as well. Like, how do we get engaged in the next generation, your generation, but also the generations that are coming up after you? How do we engage them in aquaculture?
Okay, thank you. So currently there is a gap between young scientists or young people and the aquaculture sector. And one of the chief contributor to that is the lack of knowledge about aquaculture. It's a small sector. It's a big sector globally, but it is small, relatively small in the Caribbean. An example is that the programs that are offered in my department, for example, they're the same, but the difference is the courses that are offered. Aquaculture is one of those courses that has not been offered since the 2021-2022 academic year. So this year will make 4 years, 4 cohort of students that will not be actively engaged with the aquaculture sector or being influenced into making a contribution to the advancement of the industry. So that's a gap. But how do we bridge the gap? So I think what we can do is we're talking activities through camp, high school visits, through mentorship, as I mentioned before. Camps, for example, the computer science department, they host an annual camp called Jam Coders, where they're teaching high school students to code, to programming overall. So from that age, they are being influenced to join that sector, to make solution using that technology. But what are we doing? I'm not seeing that being done for the aquaculture sector. So that can be done. High school visits. Not too long ago, I was in high school looking at people to come to our clubs to talk in devotion about the sectors, the industries that we could possibly join. And to have that, it is very influential, because at first, I was not interested in environmental biology. Dermatology had my heart, but just hearing about pest management, that made me want to join this, because I know that we have to farm sustainable pest management to support food security. And as I said, food security is dear to my heart. So just having that person come change the road that I was going towards. Also mentorship, having Miss Leanne, Miss Julianne, Miss Jamila here talking about what we can do in the industry. I know there are challenges now, but having mentorships like that, it will influence us to stay and to contribute to the industry. Another thing is providing scholarships and grants. Now, we young scientists, we need support to do the researches. So having organization funding or scholarship or playing a part in us doing the research, then that will help us to stay, because most times we will go where the resources are, go where we think, all right, I can do this, I can work, I can make an impact. And also we are thinking about ourselves, thinking about what we can do for our career. So having that support will influence us in joining the industry. Another thing is creating opportunities for growth. Now, after we've done our studies, it is very important that we are able to apply the knowledge gained. So essentially, we're looking for a space, we're looking for employment in a space where they will test our theory per se. You know, best practices, we learn about other best practices when we do our researches. So being able to apply that to our working environment is a plus. Going back to the research, I think one of the wonderful research that we can do for aquaculture, as Miss Julie mentioned before, Miss Julie from SAGE mentioned before, climate change. Climate change is a big deal right now, and it does impact the aquaculture sector. So that is one of the things I believe that organizations can help students with for their research. And one final thing is how the field is marketed. So it has a great potential, right? And we are thinking about, will this career be able to fund or live in? You know, we are thinking about being able to fund our basic living needs, right? But the sector does not need to promise us quick wealth. I don't think any scientist that is like, that will commit to improving the industry is looking for that alone. The sector needs work, and the ability to create solution is an opportunity that a lot of scientists are looking forward to, and creating solution is marketable. So we want to create solutions, and giving us a space to be a part of that through projects, through internships, is a great way to engage us into joining this sector.
Yes, absolutely. Thank you so much for that, Janelle, because as much as this event and this summit is about challenges that women face in aquaculture, it's also about the larger theme of advocacy, as we've said throughout the day. It's about engaging beyond, your workspace and really looking at the larger industry and how you can kind of contribute to the progress of that industry as a collective. I'm transitioning now to our audience questions. We have some lovely questions here from the people that have logged on. Julianne, I think I'll ask this first question to you. This audience member says, how do you see WICA contributing to regional aquaculture development in the Caribbean, and what makes it well placed to contribute?
That's a very, very good question. Our belief is that we, as scientists, have the capacity and the ability to change the paradigm of aquaculture. It has primarily always focused on farming and persons that graduate with maybe agricultural degrees, or if you just fell into it and you got some training on the side. And we believe that for aquaculture to become more competitive and competitive with what's happening in Asia, even Africa is getting a lot of attention. We need to start looking at what they are doing and getting up to the first world practices. And that will require science. So we believe that as scientists, we need to start looking at it from the science aspects going all the way down. Farmers do need to have the technology, and they need to have the understanding of the technology. And so, as I said, we don't have these courses in tertiary education. And so we want to be able to use what all of our knowledge and experiences from all of us that have traveled around the world, have worked within these first world concepts that have the scientific knowledge and technology to now apply it specifically to the Caribbean. We don't want to follow the same model as Europe or Asia or Africa. We have our own problems that we need to solve, our own cultural problems that we need to apply it to. And so we need to have our own support, our own persons applying some of this knowledge. So as WICA, we got together, and like I said, most of us are because we are women, we don't have a lot of men in the science field. We decided that we are going to now take it to the next step and form a nonprofit. So in 2024, this year, March, we're already almost at the end. We became a nonprofit, the first women-led nonprofit, like Jalima. We follow a lot of what Jalima is doing in her organization, where we are women-led, but we're trying to incorporate the different aspects because we believe it has to be gender unified, but we are women-led because we're scientists. Our platform is R&D and innovation. And so we are trying to bring all the different scientists from the different Caribbean countries. And throughout our network, we have really, we understand that there are quite a few, not a lot, because that's why we joined together and working together in the Caribbean, is that through all the different islands, there's like one institution or there's two scientists that are working on different projects. And by coming together, we can now not reinvent the wheel, but somebody wants to do red snapper, or somebody wants to do conch, or they want to look at sea urchins. We can come together and share that knowledge and to start creating more conversation, figuring out how we can get the grants, how we can get the funding, and not reinvent the wheel so that we can help the growth within the region itself.
Yes, of course, Jalima.
I could just add something to that, because before I met Julianne, or I even knew about, WICA, I really found out that this was a huge need also. There's each Caribbean country is so small, and I think each different country has strengths and weaknesses in certain parts and aspects of the industry. I come from the mariculture, but let's say like St. Lucia is great at exporting. Jamaica has the scientists. Belize has like this on the ground work, or let's say like, we have the traditional knowledge. It's like if the whole Caribbean and we all, this is why WICA is so important in my opinion, is because if we all get together and share what works and what doesn't work, I think the Caribbean as a whole can be very, very strong when it comes to aquaculture or mariculture. And we won't be just going back and reinventing the wheel. It's like, let's just see what worked for your country and what didn't, and what worked for your country and what didn't, and work together and come together as a Caribbean as a whole. You know, for seaweed in particular, we can't compete at all as just Belize on the international market with Asia and all the other places, you know. But if we come together as a Caribbean, you know, nation, and we even brand that seaweed as, you know, Caribbean seaweed and high quality and the reasons why and how it's grown, sustainably grown, we can really push our Caribbean branded seaweed, let's say, on that international market together. But Belize alone, I don't think that we have that power to do it. And we're so small, it's not even that we have enough, you know. Belize alone can't even supply, or, you know, the demand that's out there. So I think it's very, very, very important in the work that Julie is doing, to put all of these people together and women together so we can really solidify as a bigger, you know, I guess, group and just go out there.
Right. And so what I forgot to mention, as you can see in the background, is that we became an aquaculture hub. So we are the Caribbean Aquaculture Education and Innovation Hub. And we really focus on education because, as Janelle pointed out, there's a huge gap in the lack of education and training. I would have to say there is a 30-year span. That's knowledge that needs to be filled rapidly. And we also believe that innovation is the way to go. So we really need to have more innovation, looking at climate change, more resiliency within the farm systems, the seaweed farms, even the inland farms, flooding. There's just so much that needs to be looked at to bring it to what is currently happening within the Caribbean region today. And so we want to look at ourselves as a hub that we are going to start looking at different initiatives to, you know, talk about the things that Jalima said.
Yes,
I also
absolutely.
agree. I also agree. I wanted to add though that as WICA, as the Caribbean Aquaculture Education and Innovation Hub, we do have the advantage of having a number of persons with different expertise. And so, as I said, the recurrent theme is not to reinvent the wheel, but also most of us who have traveled abroad and studied abroad, we have an advantage of understanding firsthand first world processes. We want to take this back and tailor it to the Caribbean. We don't have to eventually, when we fill this gap, we won't have to necessarily look outside of the Caribbean because expertise already exists here. So I do believe that this is one of the things that WICA, that the Caribbean Aquaculture Education and Innovative Hub is really filling that gap. And I really am proud to be a part of the organization. And so I want to continue to see how best I can contribute, because yes, I belong to aquaculture, but I also belong to mariculture. And my area of interest is really shellfish. And that is something that we have a lot of potential to look at and to improve. It happens in small batches, but we want to be able to collect that information and, of course, create an area for us to be known for our shellfish and or sea moss and other marine and inland aquatic species that we produce. So really and truly, that's part of why I am so passionate about aquaculture, why I'm passionate to be a part of WICA. So yeah.
Well, actually, feeding off of what Leanne said, Julianne, we've talked previously about the importance of, you know, all of you have kind of expressed your experience of studying abroad and gaining all of that talent and intelligence and training from abroad and bringing that back home. Can you talk a little bit about the importance of that?
Definitely. So as Leanne said, you know, when I graduated donkeys years ago, it was really hard for me to get a job. I could not come back home, especially at, you know, having a PhD. Which job would I get having done all of that kind of graduate studies? So I was never able to return. And so I had to, you know, live in a foreign country. And I think there's something to that where I'm really happy that we can form this youth group because as Janelle said, I have met a new generation of kids that don't want to leave. Caribbean people are known for traveling, and you're going to find in the US, there's so many Jamaicans. There's more Jamaicans there than in Jamaica, probably. But we really want to now have a new generation of kids staying home and developing the country. And so, as you know, Leanne said, we want to be able to now create the opportunities. That's the next step. It's like, yes, we're going to give education, but then when you graduate, what do they do? So we really need to figure out that platform for creating the opportunities, the business opportunities. It cannot just be an impractical study. It has to be very practical, creating businesses, creating innovations, so that persons can stay home in their countries, build a country, and have a life there without having to leave. So having my generation and the generation that is abroad join this organization and to be able to bring all of their experiences and collaborations is very, very exciting for me, because we have so many Caribbean people overseas that we are carrying all of our knowledge and experiences to the Caribbean, and I'm very excited about that.
Well, thank you so much. We're coming up on our time here, so I appreciate the time that all of you ladies have shared with your experiences and your work and your expertise, and all of our panelists, of course. I appreciate you telling these stories so much, because the more that we tell these stories, the more we can kind of share in each other's experiences, and hopefully be able to collaborate, as you guys have said, collaborate and solve these problems together, and not reinvent the wheel for ourselves. So thank you so much thank you, Julianne, Jolima, thank you, Leanne, thank you, Janelle, and thank you to all our panelists. This concludes today's event.